Hello, curious minds. Have you ever felt that when trying to define an important word, you just end up using more words, and those words need other definitions, creating an infinite chain that never seems to touch a solid or definitive truth? That feeling of vertigo, fundamental instability in the way we communicate, is the territory of one of the most controversial and brilliant thinkers of the 20th century. Today, we are going to talk about Jacques Derrida and the seismic shift he caused in philosophy. But before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I have used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of what we are telling. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment so that you can let your imagination soar with me while we navigate abstract concepts. I truly hope you enjoy it and that it helps you visualize the invisible. Let us begin. To understand Derrida, we must first place him in his context. Born in Algeria in 1930, Derrida always felt a bit like an outsider, a Sephardic Jew in a French colony, someone living on the margins of identity. This outsider status is crucial. It allowed him to look at the great cathedral of Western philosophy, not from the central altar, but from the cracks, from the forgotten foundations. And what he found there was a structural fissure that no one wanted to admit. Before Derrida, linguistics was dominated by structuralism, led by Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure taught us that language is a system of signs, and a sign is composed of two inseparable parts, like two sides of a coin. On one hand, we have the signifier, which is the acoustic image, the sound word we say. On the other hand, there is the signified, which is the mental concept we refer to. Dog, the word, and the idea of a dog in your head. Structuralism believed that, although the relationship between the word and the thing is arbitrary, the system itself is stable. They believed we could freeze language and analyze its structure as if it were a solid geometric building. But Derrida looked at this and said no. He said that stability is an illusion. He argued that meaning is never present all at once. It is never still. Meaning is like water slipping through our fingers every time we try to catch it. This is where his famous critique of what he called logocentrism comes in. This is a fancy word to describe a very old bias in our Western culture. The obsession with the voice, with speech, as the purest form of truth. Since Plato, philosophers have been suspicious of writing. Plato thought that writing was a degraded copy of speech. For them, when you speak, your soul and your intention are present. Writing, on the other hand, is a fatherless orphan. Imagine you are talking to a friend. If they don't understand something, you can correct yourself instantly. There is an immediate presence. Your intention seems to be right there, alive. That is what classical philosophy loved, the full presence of meaning. But if you write a letter and send it, that letter travels alone. It can be read by anyone, misinterpreted, quoted out of context. The author is not there to defend it. For the tradition, writing is dangerous because it is uncontrollable. Derrida turns all of this upside down in his monumental work, Of Grammatology, published in the year 1967. He argues that this hierarchy where speech is superior to writing is entirely false and based on an illusion. Derrida says that in reality, speech has the same problems as writing. Even when I speak, I use signs that I did not invent, words that already existed before me. My own language is already a form of writing in the air. He calls this Archie writing. It is the idea that all language, whether spoken or written, functions through differences and absences, not through full presences. There is no pure meaning that we can touch directly with the mind. To understand this, let's think about how we define something. We define cold, not by itself, but because it is not hot. We define night because it is not day. The meaning of a word depends entirely on its difference from other words. If we took all the other words out of the language, a single word would mean nothing. Its value comes from its position in the network. Therefore, meaning does not reside inside the word, but in the space between words. This leads us to Derrida's most famous and difficult concept: différance. Note that I pronounce it the same, but he writes it with the letter A instead of an E. In French, the difference is inaudible. It is only seen in writing. This wordplay is a brilliant trap. Derrida forces us to look at writing to understand the concept, breaking the priority of speech. But what does this difference with an A actually mean? It combines two actions: to differ and to defer. First, it means to be different, to not be identical. As we said, a cat is a cat because it is not a dog. But the second sense is temporal, to defer in the sense of postponing, of putting off until later, like when we defer a payment. Derrida tells us that the final meaning of a sentence is always postponed. When you read the first word of a sentence, you don't yet know its full meaning until you read the last one. And that last word connects to another context. We never reach a point where we can say, here is the complete and pure meaning, still and present. There is always a trace, a footprint of what came before, and a promise of what will come after. We are always in motion. Derrida calls this indelible footprint the trace. The trace is the presence of an absence. It is like when you see smoke. The fire is not there, but the smoke is the trace of that fire. In language, every word carries the trace of those it is not. This sounds very abstract, but it has devastating consequences for how we understand truth and texts. If meaning is never fixed, then no text has a single correct and definitive interpretation authorized by the author. This is where the practice of deconstruction is born. Many people believe that deconstructing means destroying or demolishing. Nothing could be further from the truth. Derrida does not want to break texts. He wants to dismantle their mechanisms to see how they work. Deconstructing a text means reading it with extreme attention, looking for the cracks, the internal contradictions, and above all, the hidden hierarchies that the text tries to impose as natural but are actually constructed. Western philosophy has been built on binary oppositions: good versus evil, man versus woman, reason versus madness, speech versus writing. In each pair, one of the terms dominates and the other is seen as inferior or negative. Deconstruction seeks to identify these hierarchies and flip them, not to create a new hierarchy where the oppressed now oppresses, but to show that the opposition itself is unstable, that the terms need and contaminate each other. For example, let's think about the opposition between nature and culture. Traditionally, we see nature as pure and culture as the artificial thing that is added, but Derrida would show that our very idea of nature is already a cultural concept. We cannot access pure nature without using language and culture to describe it. Therefore, the purity of nature is a myth. It is always already supplemented by culture. The supplement is essential, not extra. This concept of the supplement is vital. A supplement is something added to something that was supposedly already complete. But if you need to add something, it is because the original was not as complete as you claimed. The supplement reveals a lack. Derrida applies this to writing. If writing is just a supplement to speech, a memory aid, why does speech need that aid? Because speech on its own is ephemeral, it disappears. Writing reveals the deficiency of speech. By doing this, Derrida is not playing word games for fun. He is questioning the very foundations of authority. If meaning is not fixed, who has the right to say, this is the absolute and unquestionable truth? This had a massive impact not only on philosophy, but on literature, law, architecture, and cultural studies. It gave us tools to question the discourses of power that disguise themselves as natural and self-evident truths. However, Derrida was immensely criticized. Many analytical philosophers accused him of being a charlatan, of intentionally writing in an obscurantist way to seem deep without saying anything clear. The academic battle was fierce. It is true that his style is difficult. Derrida writes in circles, uses metaphors, wordplay, and multiple languages. But he would say that writing clearly often simply means repeating established biases without questioning them. For Derrida, absolute clarity is suspicious because the world is not clear. Language is not a transparent window. It is a glass with texture, imperfections, and reflections. To ignore that is to ignore the reality of the medium in which we think. In his final years, Derrida turned his gaze toward ethics and politics. He asked, if everything is deconstructible, what happens to justice? And here comes one of his most surprising claims. Justice is undeconstructible. We can deconstruct laws because they are texts written by humans in historical moments. But justice with a capital J is an infinite aspiration toward the other. It is a promise we never fully fulfill, and that is why it can't be closed. This leads us to his concept of hospitality. For Derrida, true hospitality consists of receiving the other, the stranger, without asking them to translate themselves completely into our language or our norms. It is a radical openness to the unknown. But he admits that this absolute hospitality is impossible in practice. We always have borders, keys, and conditions. We live in the tension between the law of unconditional hospitality and the conditional laws of politics. Derrida also explored the concept of the gift. For a gift to be pure, it must expect nothing in return. Not even gratitude, because if I expect gratitude, it is no longer a gift, it is an economic exchange. It is a debt. This creates an aporia, an unsolvable paradox. The moment I recognize something as a gift, I destroy it as such because it enters the cycle of debt. The true gift is impossible, but it is that impossibility that drives us to give. Derrida taught us to live with these aporias, not to seek quick solutions that eliminate contradiction. Sometimes ethics consists of holding the tension, in doubting, in knowing that our decisions are never pure or perfect. Another fascinating concept is that of specters. In his book, Specters of Marx, Derrida talks about hauntology. The present is always haunted by the ghosts of the past, and by the ghosts of a future that has not yet arrived. History is not a straight line that we leave behind. The past persists, it haunts us, it demands justice, and the future is not something predictable. It is an event that surprises us, like a ghost walking through the wall. This idea resonates today more than ever. We live in a digital world where nothing is truly erased, where old texts resurface, where authorship blurs. The internet is, in many ways, the materialization of Derrida's Archie writing. The hyperlink is the quintessential Derridian structure. A text that leads to another, which leads to another. Without a center, without an end. We navigate a web of infinite references where the context changes with every click. Derrida died in the year 2004, but his ghost is very much alive. His thought vaccinates us against dogmatism. It alerts us against anyone who says, I have the final solution. I have the unique truth. Close the book. Deconstruction is ultimately an affirmation of life, because that which is complete, closed, and perfectly defined is dead. Life is ambiguity, it is change, it is constant interpretation. It is a text that is never finished being written. By reading Derrida, we learn to read the world in another way. We learn to listen to what is not said, to see what is hidden in the margins. We learn that our identity is not a closed fortress, but a fabric of relationships with others. we should not fear the instability of meaning. That instability is what allows for poetry, creativity, forgiveness, and the promise. If words had a single, rigid meaning, we would be robots executing commands, not humans thinking. Derrida invites us to an infinite responsibility. Since there are no fixed rules that guarantee we are right, we are responsible for every interpretation we make, for every decision we take. We cannot blame the system. It is a terrifying freedom, yes, but it is also the condition of our dignity. To think for oneself is to deconstruct the voices that tell us what to think. It is to dare to look into the abyss of language and find our own voice there. So the next time you read a text, or listen to a political speech, or even when you argue with someone, remember Derrida. Look for the crack. Look for what is being excluded so that the argument seems solid. Ask yourselves, what is it that this text does not want me to know? What is it suppressing? There, in that absence, is where the most important key is often hidden. Reading is a detective act, an act of resistance. Jacques Derrida did not leave us a closed system. He left us a way of asking. And in a world full of easy answers and fundamentalisms, knowing how to ask, knowing how to doubt, is perhaps the most valuable skill we can cultivate. Deconstruction is not the end of philosophy. It is an invitation to philosophize anew with humility and with audacity. It is accepting that we will never have the last word and that is okay. The conversation must continue. I want to delve for a moment into the relationship between Derrida and literature. He loved literature because, unlike philosophy, literature knows it is fiction. It does not pretend to say the truth with a capital T, and in that, it is more honest. Authors like Joyce or Kafka fascinated Derrida because their texts are deliberate labyrinths. They resist a single reading. They force us to lose ourselves in language to experience the materiality of words, not just their meaning. This blurs the rigid border between philosophy and literature. For Derrida, philosophy is also a literary genre. It uses metaphors, rhetoric, and style. It is not pure science. Recognizing this does not take away its value. It gives it human texture. Let's also talk about the pharmakon, another Greek term that Derrida analyzes in Plato. Pharmakon means both remedy and poison. Writing is a pharmakon. It cures forgetfulness, but it poisons living memory. It is both things at once. Western logic hates these ambiguities. It wants something to be either A or B, but the pharmakon is A and B. Deconstruction dwells in that and in that undecidability that our binary logic desperately tries to expel. It is fascinating to see how these ideas, which seem so theoretical, touch our emotional lives. How many times do we feel love and hate at the same time? Desire and fear? Our internal experience is deconstructive. It is rarely pure and simple. Derrida gives us permission to accept that complexity. We don't have to purify ourselves to be valid. We are beings made of traces, of contradictory stories, of fragments of others. And in that impure mix resides our richness. Even the idea of the I is a construction. There is no little man inside my head directing everything. My I is the result of a continuous process of differentiation, of memory, and of language. I am a text that is being written. This can cause vertigo. If there is no firm ground, where do we stand? Derrida would say we learn to swim. We don't need a concrete floor to move. Water with its currents and its depth sustains us if we know how to flow. Architecture also embraced deconstruction. Architects like Peter Eisenman or Zaha Hadid designed buildings that challenge symmetry and the center, which seem to be in the process of exploding or collapsing, yet stay standing. These buildings are visual monuments to Derrida's thought. They show us that balance does not have to be static. It can be dynamic, precarious, and exciting. Form follows fiction, not just function. Returning to politics, Derrida was a tireless defender of human rights, but always from a critical perspective. He fought against apartheid and defended undocumented immigrants. His philosophy had teeth and claws in the real world. He saw the nation-state as another structure trying to impose a pure and exclusive identity. The deconstruction of nationality seeks to open borders, not to abolish them recklessly, but to make them more porous and human. In the 21st century, where nationalisms are resurging strongly, Derrida's voice reminds us of the danger of closed identity. Purity always leads to violence. Mixture and contamination are the conditions of life. Criticizing Derrida is easy if you are looking for an instruction manual, but he doesn't offer that. He offers a flashlight for the darkness. And in dark times, a flashlight is more useful than a map of a territory that no longer exists. As we approach the end, I want you to stay with this. Deconstruction is an act of love. Yes, of love. Because you pay so much attention to the text, to the other, that you care about every detail, every contradiction, every sigh. You don't deconstruct what you don't care about. You only take the trouble to dismantle that which you want to understand deeply, that with which you want to enter into an intimate and true relationship beyond superficial appearances. Jacques Derrida, the philosopher of difficulty, is at heart the philosopher of radical attention. He asks us to wake up, to stop reading on autopilot, and start reading and living with eyes wide open. Language is our home, but it is a home with secret passages, forgotten basements, and windows that look out onto strange landscapes. Don't just stay in the hallway. Explore the whole house. Get lost in it. The difference ensures that there will always be something new to discover. Meaning is always to come. And that means the future is open. It is not written. We are writing it ourselves right now with every word. I hope this journey through Derrida's thought has moved something in your foundations. May words now seem a bit more mysterious, a bit more alive. May you distrust simple truths and embrace complexity. If this analysis has brought value to you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here we dedicate ourselves to exploring the great ideas that have shaped our history without fear of depth. Your support allows this project to keep growing. Leave me a comment below. What word or concept do you think needs to be deconstructed today? Democracy? Freedom? Love? I would love to read your perspectives and continue the conversation there. Thank you for dedicating your time, your most valuable resource, to thinking with me. In a world of noise, slow thinking is a revolutionary act. Keep your curiosity alive. I am your host in this adventure of knowledge. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and above all, keep differing.